The trash lid thudded back down, and the knitted blanket I made for Ava disappeared like it was shame. I stood in Brianna's driveway in Huntersville, fingers numb, sunlight flashing off the bag. I didn't breathe until I yanked the blanket free and saw the hem, a thin line of stitches that weren't mine. My name is Marianne Elaine Caldwell. I am 64, and 3 years ago my daughter-in-law said my son fell down the stairs. That seam was warm. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from, and if you've ever felt yourself slowly erased inside your own family. I'd like to know that too. Stories like this can sit heavy. So if you'd like to stay with me through what comes next, you can like and subscribe. Not for drama, for truth. Because sometimes the quietest betrayals happen behind front doors that look perfectly normal. Every morning at 6:15, I sit on the front porch of my brick house on Juniper Ridge Road with a mug of coffee warming my palms. The street in Charlotte is quiet at that hour. Sprinklers tick. A dog barks once and then thinks better of it. The world feels orderly. Predictable. I like predictable. Inside my kitchen, the calendar on the wall is still turned to the month Ethan died. I never flipped it. The paper has curled at the corners. Sometimes I smooth it down with my hand, like it's a wrinkle I can press out of time. I raised Ethan in that house after my husband died from a sudden stroke. One day he was mowing the lawn. The next, he was gone. I learned how to fix a leaky faucet from a neighbor. I learned how to sit in the dark after the funeral and not fall apart. Mount Zion Baptist Church became my anchor. The pews creaked. The choir sang off key sometimes. It didn't matter. I needed something solid. Ethan grew up steady, quiet. He'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I graded nursing notes from my shift. He used to say, "Mom, you don't ever sit down." I would laugh and tell him somebody had to keep the lights on. The day he told me he was going to be a father, he showed up at my front door without calling. I remember the way the afternoon light hit his shoulders. He looked nervous, almost boyish again. "You sitting down?" he asked. I am now," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Brianna's pregnant." The word hung between us like something holy. I hugged him so tight he laughed. That night, after he left, I pulled out soft sky blue yarn I'd been saving and started knitting. The rhythm of the needles clicking together filled the kitchen. I made that blanket stitch by stitch, imagining a baby wrapped in it. I worked on it while the late news murmured in the background. I worked on it while rain tapped against the window. It felt like building something safe. When Ava was born, Ethan sent me a photo from the hospital. Brianna looked pale but composed. Ava was swaddled in that very blanket. Ethan texted, "She won't sleep without it." I smiled at my phone until my cheeks hurt. There were things I didn't question then. Brianna sometimes seemed distracted, scrolling her phone at dinner. Ethan would ask her something twice before she answered. I told myself new motherhood was exhausting. Marriage is complicated. People get tired. 3 years ago, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. The screen showed Brianna's name. Her voice came through broken and breathless. "Marianne. He fell. He's not breathing. I just got home, and he's at the bottom of the stairs." For a second, I couldn't understand the words. They felt like a foreign language. "What do you mean he fell?" I said. "Where's Ava?" "She's at daycare. I just walked in and there's blood. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember locking the door. I only remember the way my hands shook on the steering wheel and how every red light felt personal." At Carolina's Medical Center, the automatic doors slid open with a hiss. The air inside smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Brianna was in the waiting area, wearing light-colored scrubs. There was a dark stain on her sleeve. She stood the second she saw me and wrapped her arms around me so hard it almost hurt. "I tried," she kept saying. "I tried." I held her because that's what you do. 2 women tied to the same man. A doctor led me into a quiet room. His voice was gentle, practiced. Severe head trauma. Impact. We did everything we could. I remember nodding like I was taking notes. Ethan's funeral filled Mount Zion Baptist Church. The organ played too loud. The casket stayed closed. Brianna sat in the front row holding Ava. She wore black. Simple and sharp. She didn't cry during the service. Her face was smooth, almost distant. I squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. But she never looked at me. Afterward, people hugged me until I felt hollowed out. Someone pressed a casserole dish into my hands. Someone else whispered that God has a plan. Brianna stood near the door, thanking people in a calm voice. In the weeks that followed, she brought Ava to my house every Sunday. I would rock her in the same chair where I'd rocked Ethan. Ava's hair smelled like baby shampoo and something floral I couldn't place. Brianna would sit at my kitchen table and talk about paperwork, about insurance calls, about how tired she was. "I don't know how I'm supposed to do this alone," she said once. "You're not alone," I told her. "We have each other." I meant it, but slowly. The visits shortened. Sunday afternoons became once every other week, then once a month. Then I started getting messages instead of knockings on the door. "Ava's sick. I'm working late. We're busy." I began to notice how careful Brianna was with time. 15 minutes, 20, never longer. She checked her watch. She kept her purse close. One evening, when she was buckling Ava into the car seat, I said, "You can stay for dinner." She smiled without warmth. Another time. The porch light flickered as I stood there watching their taillights disappear. I told myself grief changes people. It makes them sharp-edged. At church, women would ask, "How's the baby she's growing?" I'd say. And she was. I saw it in photographs more than in person. It kept knitting, scarves, little sweaters. I kept the blue blanket folded in a cedar chest when it wasn't at Brianna's house. It was the one piece of something pure I could still touch. There were small things I brushed aside. Once, when I mentioned Ethan at the table, Brianna's jaw tightened for a split second before she recovered. Another time, I stopped by unannounced and she didn't open the door for several minutes. When she finally did, she looked startled, almost annoyed. "You should call first," she said lightly. I apologized. I apologized in my own son's house. The last time I saw the blue blanket before that day in the driveway, it was draped over Ava's legs while she played with blocks on the floor. I remember smoothing it out, noticing a faint scent of perfume that didn't belong to a nursery. I didn't think anything of it. I think about that now sometimes. How many things I didn't think anything of. And how quiet the world can be right before it cracks. Brianna didn't cut me off all at once. She did it slowly. Until one day I realized the whole thing had unraveled in my hands. It started with rules that sounded reasonable. "Ava needs consistency," she said at my kitchen table, tapping her nails against her phone. "So let's keep visits short. 15 minutes is plenty." 15 minutes. Like I was checking out a library book. I nodded anyway, because Ava was on my rug stacking cups, humming to herself, and I would have agreed to anything just to hear that sound in my house. When the timer on Brianna's watch beeped, she stood up instantly. "Time?" she said. I walked them to the door and watched Brianna buckle Ava into the car seat without looking at me. Ava reached out her hands. "Grandma," she said. Brianna kissed the top of her head. "Wave, bye, bye." And the car pulled away. After that, the calls got shorter too. If I asked to see Ava, Brianna answered like I was bothering her at work. "We're busy, Marianne. I'll text you when we can." Weeks passed. My porch coffee cooled while I waited. Then one day, in the middle of the year, I drove to Huntersville with a small stuffed bunny in my passenger seat. I told myself I'd drop it off and leave. The garage door was open. Brianna stepped out in scrubs, hair pulled tight, moving fast. She dragged a black trash bag to the curbside bin and shoved it in. Then another. On the third one, something blue caught the light. A corner of yarn and lace edging I knew in my bones. My blanket. I watched her press it down with both hands, not gently, like she was angry at it. Then she slammed the lid and walked inside. For a second I couldn't move. The bunny lay in my lap like a joke on me. I waited until the house went quiet, then crossed the driveway. The bin smelled like heat and sour milk. I lifted the lid and reached in. My shoulders screamed. My fingers closed around the yarn. I pulled the blanket free and held it to my chest, breathing in a strong perfume that didn't belong to baby things. Back home. I locked my door and carried the blanket straight to my bedroom. Stripes of afternoon light crossed the bed. I spread the blanket out and smoothed it flat. That's when I felt it. A hard rectangle under the softness. Wrong in the center. I flipped the blanket over and found a seam I didn't recognize, stitched in thread that matched too well. My scissors made a small sound when I opened them. Snip, snip, the yarn gave way. I reached inside and pulled out an iPhone. Black case. Screen dark. I found a charger in a box of cords I'd kept for years and plugged it in, when it finally turned on. It opened without asking me for a password. The photos came first. Brianna leaning into a man with dark hair, her mouth on his cheek. More pictures at a beach. A hotel room. Dates from before Ethan died. My stomach rolled. I set the phone down, then picked it up again. The messages were worse. One thread, one name K. At first, it was flirting. Then it was cruelty. Ethan was boring. Ethan was in the way. Ethan had everything in his name. Then the words that made my vision tunnel. What if he just wasn't here anymore? I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing through my nose like I was back in nursing school. There was a note saved on the phone, written like a checklist. A Tuesday. A time. The stairs. When to call 911. A reminder to cry real tears. I stared at it, and then I called Linda Price. Linda arrived with her keys still in her hand, eyes sharp the second she saw my face. Marianne. What is this? I handed her the phone and watched her scroll. The color drained from her cheeks. Oh, my God, she whispered. If I do this alone, I said. They'll say I imagined it. Linda set the phone down like it could stain the table. Then we move quiet, she said. The next day, I went to Carolinas Medical Center and asked Dr. Nina Patel to meet me in the cafeteria. When I asked about Ethan's last weeks, her mouth tightened. He was worried, she said. He said Brianna wanted him to increase his life insurance. He did it. He thought it was responsible. I thanked her and walked out with my legs unsteady. From there, I drove to Bright Steps Daycare. Miss Tanya Brooks pulled up records and read the times out loud. Ava had been there all day. And Brianna picked her up later than the story she'd told me ever suggested, Tanya added. She was in a hurry, like she didn't want to talk. Linda and I agreed on one more step. I called Brianna and kept my voice sweet. I asked if I could stop by for 15 minutes, just to see Ava. Brianna paused, then said, Fine, but only 15. Inside her house. Ava ran to me and I dropped to my knees, letting her climb into my arms. Her cheeks were warm. My chest tightened with love and anger tangled together. Linda asked to use the bathroom and disappeared down the hall. Brianna watched the clock. She has a nap, she said, flat. I kept talking. Then, softly. Does Ava still use the blue blanket? For a heartbeat, Brianna's face went blank. Then she smiled. Oh, that old thing? It's around somewhere. Linda came back with her phone tucked away and eyes that said she'd found what she needed. When we stepped outside, Ava waved from the doorway. Bye. Grandma? She called. Brianna's hand rested on her shoulder. She's busy, she corrected Ava lightly. And the words hit me like a slap. The international terminal at Charlotte Douglas was all bright glass and hard floors. I saw Brianna first, moving fast with Ava's small hand trapped in hers, 2 suitcases clicking behind them. Detective Samuel Reyes met me near a pillar. Mrs. Caldwell, he said. Low, stay behind me. Don't speak to her. Ava wore a purple hoodie, hair in 2 puffs, sneakers lighting up as she walked. She kept looking back, confused, like she could feel the ground shifting under her. Brianna leaned across the counter, voice syrup sweet. The agent typed, frowned, then tried again. Brianna's smile held too long. The agent slid 2 booklets back. Ma'am, these passports aren't scanning. The machine made a tired beep, then another. The agent's eyes darted from the glossy covers to Brianna's face. Brianna's jaw worked once, like she was chewing down panic she couldn't swallow in front of everyone. Brianna's shoulders locked. Try again. Reyes nodded once to 2 officers nearby. They walked up, calm as church ushers. Brianna Hart Caldwell. Reyes called. Brianna turned. When she saw me behind him, her expression sharpened. You, she said, like it was an insult. Ava's eyes found mine. Grandma, she whispered. I took a step, but Reyes lifted a hand. Ma'am. Brianna lifted her chin. I'm traveling with my daughter. What is this? We need to ask you some questions, Reyes said. I want a lawyer. Brianna's sweetness dropped. Her gaze flicked toward the doors, counting distance. Reyes kept his voice steady. Step away from the child. Brianna tightened her grip. Ava, stay with Mommy. Ava's mouth opened, then closed, her face crumpled. I don't wanna, she said, barely audible. That small plea split me. I felt it in my throat. The same place I'd swallowed grief for 3 years. Reyes leaned in just enough to be heard. Child services is on the way. Ava will be safe. Brianna's eyes snapped to me. You couldn't just let it go, she said. You had to play detective. I didn't answer. If I spoke, I knew I'd break. One officer unzipped Brianna's carry-on. The sound was loud in my ears. Inside, under a sweater, were stacks of cash bound with rubber bands. Brianna's lips parted. For a second. She looked startled, almost young. Then the mask came back on. Harder. That's not illegal, she said quickly. That's my money. Another suitcase opened, more cash, packed neat, like it had been counted and rehearsed. The agent at the counter stared, then looked away like she wished she hadn't seen it. Reyes didn't raise his voice. We have reason to believe you're attempting to flee with false travel documents. This is harassment, Brianna snapped. You can't prove anything. Reyes held her stare. We can prove enough to stop you from boarding today. Ava started crying, quiet and steady, not a tantrum, a fear she didn't know how to hide. She reached out one hand toward me, fingers opening and closing. I stepped forward anyway. Slow. Ava, I said. My voice came out rough. Baby, come here. Brianna yanked her closer. No. And that's when Ava did something Brianna didn't expect. She pulled back. Just a little. And turned her face towards me. Her light-up shoes blinked as she took a tiny step in my direction. A woman from Child Services arrived and crouched to Ava's level, speaking softly. Ava didn't answer. She only kept her eyes on me, like I was the only fixed point in the room. Reyes touched my elbow. I need you to identify yourself as her grandmother. My tongue felt thick. I'm Mariana Lane Caldwell. Brianna's stare turned venomous. She's mine, she said. Reyes answered, flat and final. Not today. The officers guided Brianna away. She twisted once, trying to look back at Ava, then at me, like she could still scare me into silence. Her eyes promised something cold. Then the crowd swallowed her, and the clicking suitcases stopped. Ava stumbled toward me and I caught her. She clung to my sweater like she was afraid the whole world might slide apart. Over her head, I watched Reyes exhale, just once. Like a man who'd been holding his breath for a very long time. That night, the house on Juniper Ridge Road felt different. Not lighter, not yet. Just quieter, in a way that didn't threaten me. Ava fell asleep in the spare bedroom with her small hand wrapped in the edge of my cardigan. I sat beside the bed long after her breathing evened out, watching the rise and fall of her chest. The street outside hummed once as a car passed, then went still. On my kitchen table lay the things that had changed everything. The old iPhone, the photographs Linda had taken of the insurance payout, the bank transfer to Kevin Mercer, the copy of Ava's birth certificate with Sofia Alvarez's name printed where Brianna's should have been, each paper flat, each fact heavy. Detective Reyes had been clear before he left the airport. We're reopening both cases. We're requesting a second autopsy. We're pulling financial records properly this time, and Kevin Mercer will be brought in again. He didn't promise me anything else. He didn't have to. Brianna had tried to leave with fake passports and cash packed like she'd been counting down to this moment for months. That mattered. Flight risk mattered. It shifted the balance in a way even I could feel. But I also knew something else. If I had stormed into that house weeks ago and screamed, none of this would have held. If I had confronted her with the phone before the right hands touched it, she would have destroyed what was left. Silence had been my weapon. Patience had been sharper than anger. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and slid them back into a folder. The phone I left out. I didn't power it off. For 3 years, I had swallowed grief and called it strength. This time, strength meant something different. This time, I was not asking to be included. I was drawing a line. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. I'd really like to know where you're listening from, and what you would have done if you were standing in that airport watching your grandchild reach for you. Would you have waited? Would you have fought? If this story meant something to you, you can subscribe and stay with me as the rest of this journey unfolds. Not because it's dramatic, but because silence inside families is more common than we admit. Some nights. I still wake up at 6:15 and sit on that porch before the sun rises. The house is calm now. Ava is safe down the hall, but the blue blanket is folded in my closet. And sometimes, when I open that door, I remember exactly what it felt like to pull it out of the trash.